Change is often spoken about as liberation, and for the most part it is. But what we do not always acknowledge is that change can also feel like betrayal. Not because the old pattern was good for us, not because the old response was the truth of who we are, and not because the conditions or outcomes we want to leave behind were aligned, but because some part in us may still be loyal to what and who that pattern once protected. Loyalty to an old version of self. Loyalty to survival strategies. Loyalty to identities that once helped us cope. Loyalty to roles that once kept us accepted, needed, safe, or approved of. So when we begin to change, we are not only interrupting a pattern of behaviour, we may also be loosening an old loyalty. And that can feel far more confronting than simply choosing differently. Many patterns do not begin as problems. They begin as solutions. A child learns to stay quiet because speaking honestly did not feel safe. A person learns to overfunction because being needed felt like belonging. Someone learns to stay vigilant because relaxation did not feel available. Someone becomes highly competent because competence created approval, protection, or control. Someone learns to please because conflict once felt too costly. Someone learns to perform strength because vulnerability had nowhere safe to land. At the time, these responses may have made sense. They may have helped us adapt. They may have helped us be accepted. They may have helped us avoid rejection, criticism, abandonment, disappointment, or emotional overwhelm. This is why the old pattern cannot simply be dismissed as bad. It may now be outdated, costly, limiting, but it was not random. It was protecting something. And until we understand what the pattern believes it is protecting, change can feel like a threat. There is a point where loyalty becomes limitation. Loyalty to being useful can become self-abandonment. Loyalty to being strong can become emotional isolation. Loyalty to being needed can become over-responsibility. Loyalty to keeping the peace can become silence. Loyalty to being competent can become mistaken identity. Loyalty to staying alert can become inner vigilance. Loyalty to an old role can become a life lived on repeat. And this is where change becomes emotionally complicated. Because the conscious part of us may want freedom, but another part in us may still believe the old pattern is protection. As a consequence, we may move towards something new, then pull back instead of continuing the exploration. We may recognize the truth, then minimize it instead of standing firm. We may set a boundary, then feel guilty instead of feeling safe. We may stop over-functioning, then feel vulnerable instead of harmonious. We may begin to choose ourselves, then feel selfish instead of self-honouring. We may interrupt the old pattern, then feel as though we have betrayed something familiar instead of celebrating what's to come. And it is not because the new choices are wrong, but because the old loyalties have not yet been observed. This is important. The old self is not the enemy. The part in you that learnt to cope is not the enemy. The part in you that learnt to stay quiet, stay useful, stay vigilant, stay competent, stay pleasing, stay strong, or stay in control is not the enemy. That part in you may be tired. It may be outdated. It may no longer know how to lead you into the life you are now ready to live. But it still deserves understanding. Because transformation does not require us to reject the old self. It asks us to observe what was formed, to recognize what was repeated, to interrupt what is no longer true, and to stop confusing protection with alignment. Sometimes change feels like betrayal because we are asking an old survival strategy to step aside. And that old survival strategy may not yet understand that we are no longer living in the same conditions that created it. The purpose of awareness is not to shame the old pattern. It is to create a new relationship with it. To be able to say, I see why you formed. I understand what you were trying to protect. I honour how you helped me survive, belong, cope, continue, or succeed. But I no longer need to obey you by default. This is where a new loyalty becomes possible. Loyalty to the new truth. Loyalty to alignment. Loyalty to the life that is asking to be lived more consciously. Loyalty to the part in us that is no longer willing to survive at the cost of self-abandonment. This is not instant. It is not always comfortable. And it is rarely neat. But every time we observe and interrupt the old pattern, we loosen the loyalty that once kept it in place. And slowly, change begins to feel less like betrayal and more like return. So the reflection for this week is, what part in me still believes this pattern is protecting me? Not as a question of blame, not as a question of failure, but as a question of compassionate honesty. Because if change has felt difficult, it may not be because you are unwilling. It may be because part of you is still being loyal to something that once helped you survive. And when that loyalty becomes visible, things can begin to shift. If this reflection resonates with you, you are welcome to watch the full guided reflection. sit with the questions, and explore the free resources available through docjo.online. And as usual, continue with the next honest question.